Good morning, everyone. Are we all done? We still need a little bit more time. What? You'll keep going anyway if I'm still talking, eh? So. It's an interesting thing when you talk over your sermon on the way to church with your wife and she prays for you. It's like, I don't know who should be worried, you guys or me. Maybe a bit of both. But anyway, let me pray again, and then we'll kick off. Our Lord, as we come together this morning, Lord, may we be able to just clear our minds and open them up to what you want to speak to us today. Open our hearts, Lord, and move us more into the image of your Son. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Let me ask you the question, would you have worn the jersey on Thursday night? Well, fair point. And I raise that not because of the controversy it has evoked and the dramas that I suppose that are now on the table, but it's one of the most recent examples and issues that we as the wider church have to deal with. And whether you like it or not, you and I have been dragged into this mess. Take out the wearing the Manly jersey, that's a no-brainer. But the fact that Christians have taken a stand, we're now being drawn into that. And so I don't raise it to keep the conversation going, but just to say, hey, here's an area of society that has sort of come to our door or we're in their space, but how do we respond? How do we approach it? What tools do we employ to work out which way do we go? And when we come to James, that's one of wisdom. And I think the church over time, for many, many years, probably from the day we started, I think we've been unhelpful at times in engaging society. And I think we at times have been unloving and ungracious, and at other times silent when we should have spoke. And when we have spoken, we've probably said some of the dumbest or wrong things. And so my point is that we're going to face things as we engage, but we need to be wise in our approach. And I think we have far more to bring to the table and offer this conversation than the world is willing to actually listen to and hear. And so today, as we come to the book of James, we start a new series. James is one of the most practical how-to books that you're going to find in the New Testament. If you want to work out how to live an authentic, genuine Christian life, then James is a good place to start. James is a very practical man. He's going to give us nothing new. There's no deep theological positions he's going to introduce or expand on. And when you read it, it comes across like a bunch of short sermonettes grouped together. Like it doesn't seem connected. But when you push into it, you actually find that it is. But before you get too excited, James is a book that's going to either confront you, because he has some quite sharp and challenging things to come up with, and he's going to challenge you. The other thing is, he may even scare some of you because of some of the things that he comes out with. Jen and I were on holidays for the last couple of weeks, and we're down around Beechworth, down in Victoria, down around Ned Kelly country. There was an ad that came on the TV down there. I hate Melbourne TV, but anyway, it's a different story. But there was an ad for Charles Sturt University, and it says, their catchline was, it's not what we say that makes a difference, it's what we do. It's not what we say that makes a difference, it's what we do. So, on one level, talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. And that's what James is about. James is the sort of bloke that wants to get into our business and challenge the way that we live. He wants to challenge what we think and say and the way that we live that out. That's why this is a scary book. If you want to get into James, it is a very scary book. If you read E-News, there was a line there about the Bible Project. Has anyone checked out the Bible Project online? There's a couple there. Can I encourage you to go to it? It gives you short video clips that give you a summary of pretty much all the books of the Bible. Usually 8 to 10 minutes. The theology is pretty good. What it encompasses is awesome. In their one for James, the guys say that it's a beautifully crafted punch in the gut for those who want to follow Jesus. Like, it is one of those books. It confronts, it challenges, and it snaps us, I think, out of our sense of comfort that we often get to. So this week, we're going to look at the first half, verses 1 to 18. Next week, Mark's taking us through the back half of the chapter. And so this week next week sets up chapters 2 to 5. So all the themes and ideas that come out in the later chapters, we get introduced to this week and next week, and it builds the foundation for those teachings. But as I move forward, let me ask you this question. What do you think is the goal of the Christian life? What's the goal of the Christian life, if you had to bring it out? Be like Jesus. Very good. Sorry? Glorify. Yeah. Pretty much. Couple others? Same thing? Serving faithfully. Making disciples. All of that. One more? Striving to walk the walk as Jesus did in life. And pretty much all of those, I would probably put under the banner or the umbrella of maturity. That's the fruit of a mature Christian life, and that's what James is banging on about here. Often people talk about heaven as being the goal. We're progressing through to heaven. Heaven's the destination. We're on a journey towards heaven, and the journey represents everything that you guys spoke about. And that hangs off our maturity. But then how well have we, or how well are we being transformed into the image of Christ? How well are we growing in our Christian faith? How well are we maturing? That's one of the big questions that I think we all need to ask ourselves. As we get into the book, we see that this is a book written by James. There's about 6 Jameses in the Bible, in the New Testament, that we come across. I think you can narrow it down to 2. One is James, the son of Zebedee. He's one of the 12 disciples, but he loses his head around AD 44, which is roughly the time that this is started to have been written. So that takes him out of the equation. The only other person is James, the brother of Jesus. And you might be thinking, why do I tell you that? I encounter a few people in my travels that want to argue Jesus has no brothers and that Mary had no other kids. But when you dig into the scriptures, you clearly see there is a wealth of evidence there to support who Jesus' brothers and sisters were. So I just put that as an aside. But James was a leader in the mother church in Jerusalem. Jewish people who have converted to Christianity, Messianic Jews, Jews who believe the Messiah that was promised was fulfilled in Christ. They've experienced famine throughout the land. There's poverty there, persecution from the Jews. And James was known as a peacemaker. They reckon he had knees like a camel. Interesting thought, isn't it? Because he spent so much time on them praying. And he led the church with wisdom and courage up until his death, of which they say he was stoned. One that the most credible says he was stoned to death. So there's a bunch of background difficulties that James has experienced, hardships and trials that he writes from. He's no guy sitting in an ivory tower or an office talking about the way we should run it from an academic perspective. He's on the ground, he's got skin in the game, and the guy's the real deal. So as we journey through, there's a question ringing in my ears. How? I often sit in churches, I've listened to many, many sermons, and the constant question I keep asking is how? How do I do what the preacher is speaking about? I hope you do the same with me. I hope you do the same when you come to the scriptures. And then when I come here, it's like, how? How do I grow in wisdom and become more Christ-like? How do I grow more to be like Jesus as I follow after him now until the day I meet him face to face? How do you do that? That got me thinking. And as I was driving, I think I was driving back up the freeway, been thinking about this for a bit. You know what image came to my mind? You probably won't. A cheese wheel. Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking, why a cheese wheel? And I thought, okay, we get the milk, we make cheese, we make it into some sort of a structure, and then we shelve it where it sits, and then over time, it develops and matures. It starts to dehydrate, the enzymes and everything else inside. Yep, like a true European, salt in everything. I'm with you. But essentially, it sits there, and if the environment or the circumstances are okay, the cheese will mature and grow in flavour and all the rest of it. And I thought, that's been my life at various seasons for quite a while at times. There was a lack of intentionality in what I would do to grow. I just come to church, and coming to church for me was like plonking myself on the shelf in whatever you call the cheese room, coolers or whatever they are, hoping that this environment would just bring enough into my life to move me a bit further along. And every now and then I got a punch in the guts or a slap in the face. They go, no. Got to change, you've got to be more intentional. And so I think if we are to grow in maturity, we need to develop some intentionality. And so verses 2 to 4 spells out a bit of what this looks like. It says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." This concept of maturity and completeness or wholeness is what James is talking about. He speaks about it 7 times throughout this letter, so it's a big thing for him. And so from a biblical perspective, maturity is one of our big focuses, one of our big goals. This is a person whose life is whole, someone who's integrated what they think, what they believe into their actions. There's consistency between their talk and their walk. And it's a person whose character is formed according to what the Bible says, not the perfection of what the world says. There's a big difference between the two. It's not the perfection of flawlessness that the world wants to hold up a Christian to, so that when you fail, you're then deemed a hypocrite. I know I'm a hypocrite. It's a no-brainer. And they want to judge and condemn you, but it's more of a picture of the wholeness and completeness that as you understand who you are in God's grand scheme, that brings you to that point of perfection or completeness or wholeness. And this comes about through many trials. Trials of many kinds, tests, hardships, difficulties, and pain. But not only that, when I'm sitting in the midst of this pain or this difficulty or this hardship, James says I'm to be joyful. Not for what I'm experiencing, but for the bigger picture. That sounds crazy, I know. That life's trials and hardships are supposed to bring joy, but they can also be an opportunity or a gift that God can use to produce endurance and perseverance and resilience and help shape my character more into Christ-likeness. You see, God can do amazing work in us when we trust Him and walk with Him inside whatever painful or difficult situation we find. Through that, He journeys with us to a greater and deeper level of maturity. But it's a matter of perspective. Last night I was watching the marathon. Anyone watch that last night? Yeah. It's a bit of a boring thing. It sort of floats your boat or it doesn't, watching people run for 2 hours, 2.5 hours at times. Not very exciting. But the lady that won the women's marathon, Jessica Stenson, they were talking about her endurance and her resilience. How as a 35-year-old mother, they were banging on about the difficulties of being a mother, the difficulties of getting COVID leading up to this race, of injury, of realising a couple of years out from the Tokyo Olympics that you're pregnant and then 10 months before trying to qualify and you can't. You know, like Bruce McAvaney he was amazed at her endurance and perseverance. The last 2 Commonwealth Games, she got the bronze medal. And now she bounces back and wins the gold. It's an amazing story. And then you listen to Kate Campbell. She was talking about a similar concept, but amongst swimmers. And she said, I've seen swimmers face adversity, and it goes one of 2 ways. It either makes them bitter and busted, and they go downhill, or they come back better and stronger, physically, emotionally, psychologically. It's a perspective issue. In the midst of an adversity or a trial or a hardship, which side do you want to view? But in our society, the path of comfort and ease is one that we are generally gravitating towards. This is the wisdom and this is what I've come across in researching this. I deserve an easy life, and so do you. Ease, joy, peace and fulfillment. That's for you, friends. Life is tough. Yeah, it is. Life is unfair. Yes, it is at times. And it's like, but I shouldn't be experiencing this. And I think over time we've become soft. We've become too uncomfortable with what we have. As we're driving around Beechworth, I don't know what's there now, a couple thousand people. At its peak, there were 20,000 people there back in the 1800s. Think that through. We were there just last week. It was like close to 0 at times, a couple of degrees at best. At times we were cold. And we were dressed in our Kathmandu's. You know, like fluffy stuff, top dollar, understuff, or gloves, you name it, and we still felt the chill a bit. You go back to Ned's time, he had no air conditioning on his horse. What he did, it was just set on cold. Yeah. Yep. How would we go if we went back there? We had a little cabin with a gas heater and a firewood stove, a wood heater. They had tents. They were camped down on the creeks. I looked at some of the boots in one of the museums. My feet would have frozen in them. You want to talk about persevering and enduring? The biggest thing I had to endure through down there was the lack of phone reception. I had to pull up out front of the bank and hook into their Wi-Fi to get anything. Like really, that would be one of the biggest things I had to endure down there. So when do we start believing this lie that life should be pain-free, it should be problem-free? When do we start thinking that with enough money, enough technology, and with enough progress, We can eradicate discomfort and pain. It's crazy. I went to Kurong and I typed in the search for books, the problem of pain. Boom, up comes books. I then typed in the problem of happiness. Guess how many books I found? You're right, none. Tony Robbins, I think, nails it to one degree. And if you want, you can go to Florida, I think in November. 1,700 Australian will get you 2 tickets to one of his Unleash the Power Within, whatever, that's just the basic level. But he says, under one of his posts, how to get what you deserve. His first line is, the first rule of life is that it doesn't owe you anything. I sort of agree with that to an extent, but when I understand my sinful nature, I actually am owed something, and it's not good. But bringing it back to a more sensible level, when I'm in the midst of a hardship, whether that's a job loss, I've lost a family member, there's a plane crash, rivers flood, droughts, all these sorts of things, how do I make sense of that? How do I get going with perseverance through that test to arrive at maturity? Because the only other option is I give in. There are only 2 options. And friends, that ability to choose, I think, is linked to wisdom. It's linked to the wisdom of understanding the world and the situation we live in from God's perspective. His purposes and plans are different to ours, and we often want to bend his purposes and plans to fit ours and then live accordingly, but we need to live according to his plans and purposes, and at times, in the middle of them, we can't see that. When you get through and look back, you're often in a better position. And it's in that hard spot that we need to echo the first and second song actually, that God is good regardless. If you believe God is good, that's it, full stop. Whether you're cashed up or you're poor, God is good. And God is at work. And there will be some joy in that. As we lead into this issue of poverty and wealth that James speaks about in verses 9 to 11, just quickly let me say that wealth isn't the issue. The Bible nowhere talks about being wealthy as being sinful or as being wrong. Same for poverty. The issue here for those of low means or those living in poverty is that they come to an understanding that the world sees them as less, but God sees them differently. God has elevated them to his height, and they live on the independence of that daily for him to provide for them and sustain them and keep them going. I once had a bloke in jail. He used to call himself Prince. And I struggled with that. I struggled to call him Prince. I said to him, why do you call yourself Prince? He said, because I am a Christian. I went, yeah, okay, I can see where this is going. He goes, I'm a child of the King. I'm a child of the living God. If I'm one of God's children, that makes me a prince. So I call myself Prince to remind myself that, and others call me that as well. I could see where he's coming from, and that is the reality. As one of God's kids, we are essentially princes and princesses. On the other side, for the rich, it's not so much the issue of being rich, but rather how much do you rest on that? What's your attitude towards that? Is your security based on your riches or on your God? Does your wealth give you position and status above those? We're going to get into this a bit in the coming weeks. Does it establish your worth as a person so your bank account makes you more worthy than me? Do your riches prove your success? Does your wealth bring happiness? But then there's also the other side, is that wealth can also be a burden. I've come across and spent time with a few rich people over the years, and I've always come away thinking, and for some I've come away quite saddened because I wouldn't want their life, as rich as it is. There are too many dramas and problems that come with it. Dulls their sight, draws them easier to draw them back into the world. So the issue is more, how is my wealth acquired, how is it used, and what is my attitude towards it? And the reality is, for James, all that's going to fade and disappear. Just as the flowers that come up in the morning, by the afternoon, the sun has scorched them and they're dead. That's how transitory our wealth can be. And so from that position, the wealthy person that comes to faith realizes that was the low position that God's taken me from. We come to verses 12 to 18 at the back end. And we're sort of back to the start. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desires he is dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who doesn't change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. Every circumstance that we meet requires a response. Every test, every trial is essentially a temptation that requires a response from us. Whether that's some of those things I spoke about before, the traffic that you're going to face tomorrow morning as you go to work, the guy that jumps in front of you and cuts you off, the crash up ahead that's going to make you late for work. You get to the Starbucks speaker and you find out they've run out of oat milk. Or there's no cream for your frappe. What do? Just go home, folks. Throw a sickie. More seriously, it might be a doctor's diagnosis. Or more recently, it might be the first Tuesday of every month as the RBA meets. And we find out interest rates have gone up again. How am I going to pay my mortgage? This is where wisdom kicks in, because you have your budget to work out with a number of commitments. They all can't stay the same, can they? Wisdom comes into that as to how you're now going to redivide your money. Will I persevere, God, and move through this and grow? Or will I listen to the voice inside that would lead me the easy way? That's the challenge. And when you understand this voice, and when you read James, it's not, what haven't you heard in chapter 1 so far? Or if you've read through the book? You ever heard of the devil or Satan? It's not his fault. James says it's us. Our desires are informed and often led by our sinful nature. Let me read Mark chapter 7. A bit out of it anyway. Verses 21 and 23 says, this is Jesus speaking, he says, for from within, Out of men's hearts come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and make a man unclean. The heart is that spiritual part of us where emotions and desires dwell and then spring from. And if you go through the Old Testament and the New Testament, you find out that our heart, prior to meeting Jesus, isn't that great and continues not to be that great afterwards either as well. It's deceitful. It's described as being a stone. We're encouraged to guard it. And then David even prays, Lord, create in me a clean heart. Paul encourages us in Ephesians and Colossians to put off the old nature, put to death who we were. And yet the world we live in says, give it life. Live according to your heart. Follow your heart. Which wisdom are you going to apply to your life? Because the world's biggest problem, folks, is our hearts. It's internal, it's not external. Popular Christianity doesn't talk about this. Biblical Christianity does. If you watched any of the footy games over the weekend, even if you watched the marathon, I think the winner of the men's stood there. I don't know what religion he was, but he took a knee and put his hands up and he prayed. Parramatta, the winger that scored, I think, the last try. I think he scored 2 tries in the night. The camera circled him as he took a knee, had his head bowed, eyes closed, and he was praying. The Panthers, same deal. There was a bunch, I think there was 7 or 8 of them I saw, circled, heads bowed, praying. They're happy to promote that because they're silent. And when you listen to Christians who are in society, who are on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, listen to what they say, but more importantly, listen to what they don't say. Popular Christianity will talk about the goodness of God, the blessings of God, and how good God is, and all this sort of stuff. All the feel-good stuff. Biblical Christians will talk about all that stuff, but also sin and judgment and repentance and the fact that we are sinful. That is what the world doesn't like. And that's the choice we make. Which wisdom are we going to apply to our life? Because if we follow our heart, we're going to be led astray. The wisdom of the world says this: follow your heart. The best way is to listen to what you want, and not your head, what it says that other people expect of you, so that you can be free to do what you care about. Or, if you follow your heart, you free yourself to become the person you truly want to be and live the life you want. That's beautiful. I think that's more of what we see today. It's part of the mess we're in. And the question, or the statement isn't a question. It's not if you're tempted. James says when you're tempted. It's our desires that tempt us. And our desires may be innocent, they may be good. Your desire for food or hunger is a good desire. It gets to a certain line and then it becomes gluttony. It's no good. Our desire to have money is a good thing. I want to pay my bills. But if I get over the line into greed, that's not good. Same for work. I want to work, I want to have a job. But when work becomes my idol, it's not good, or my identity. And there's a bunch of these different areas as we look. There's a line path we go down where there's a line. And over it, we're in sinful territory. And that's what James says here. That fully gestated, fully birthed, gives birth to sin. That sin then gets to full term, and by that, a non-repentant person to the end, there's death. That's on us. Let me finish up with two verses, verse 5, verse 18, because there is hope. Bit of negativity there, but there is a lot of hope in this first passage. Verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously. The God we serve is a generous, giving God. Ask him, he will give. You want wisdom? Ask him. Later on, James says, I think in verse 4 of chapter 2, you don't have because you don't ask. And in verse 18, God chose to give us birth. God wants transformation, not restoration. He doesn't restore us back to new versions of ourselves. We're transformed versions of our old self, moulded and shaped in the image of Jesus. There's a big difference between the two. And just as you and I had no input into our birth, we had no input into our spiritual birth. And so we really put nothing into that meeting with Jesus, because he's the one that has done it all for us. So as you sit here, there's three groups of people that came to mind as I was thinking through the finishing up here. The three groups of people who are sitting here and thinking, I don't know where I really stand with God. Well, there's some there that here who are 100% confident we're right with God. Where are you on that? As you sit here, are you 100% confident that you're right with God? That if you go to meet him today, he's going to let you into his heaven. And then there's some of us who sit here who are 100% happy with our position, but are we 100% happy with our spiritual journey? Are we growing into maturity and Christ-likeness, or am I like a cheese wheel parked on the shelf? Where are we at? And the third group that came to mind is those who may be in the battle of their life. Those who are being tempted away by their own evil desires. Those who are struggling with things that aren't honouring to the Saviour they speak that they serve. Some may have crossed that line. Some may have given birth. But my challenge is to take action. Until we stand before God, there is hope. There is recovery. And the Bible calls that repentance. And so the thing that was floating around in my head is that we don't do this part well in the church. We condemn and judge, but we don't embrace and journey with too well. How this happens, I don't know. But I was thinking through of some way of trying to encourage, support those of us amongst us who are in that mess, in that grey area, who are heading down this path but don't know the way out. I don't know. If that's you, come and have a chat to me. I'd love to help. And if it's not me, please speak to someone else. So let me finish up there. Please join me as I pray. Father, as we sit here, Lord, we're challenged and confronted by what James says. And Lord, there is I'm assuming people amongst us who aren't right with you, Lord. And I pray this just be an opportunity where they can be touched by you, that, Lord, you can just remove that veil from their eyes to see you for your goodness and in all your glory, and commit their lives to you. Father, for those of us who are on the spiritual journey, Lord, I pray that you would you just open our eyes and our hearts in these coming weeks to be able to see who you are and grow us. Lord, may we be intentional in the things that we do, the things that we say we're going to do and then go on to do. May we not be that cheese wheel that's just parked, but may we be actually intentional in the way that we move forward in the transformation of our lives to be more like your Son. And Lord, for those caught in struggles and sin that's leading down towards death, Father, may you intervene. May you bring about repentance. And may we all stand with the tax collector that Jesus spoke about as we beat our breast, looking down and saying, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. And Lord, for all of us, may we just have the wisdom to hold on to the truth that you are good, regardless of the situation or circumstances, that you are with us in our times of difficulty, and that you are at work. And it's for your glory and our joy we pray. Amen.